ready to branch out, to take a leap of faith, to love yourself and others fully? Then let go of whatever no longer serves you to take action now on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Erica will energize and excite you to power up your passionate dream that sets your soul on fire. With Erica's E3 approach, equipping, empowering, and enlightening yourself so you can be yourself for yourself. Get ready and get rooted to live a life without regrets, without what ifs, without should haves, and especially without empty feelings from a life unexplored. This hit show helps you build powerful and intentional roots to live it up, love it up, and let it go. Get fearlessly ready and powerfully rooted in your yes with your host, Erica Gifford Mills, and be fearless about your more and stand in your yes. Now on Get Rooted Radio.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. A big shout out to my producer today, Jessica. Jessica, how are you doing? Hey, you're always a great surprise. Did you have a good weekend? Oh, yep. It's fall, y'all, right? Well, okay, controversial statement right here. Tacos are more and they're better than PSL any day, but I am all right. So you have so many talents, Jessica. I mean, I heavily rely on you here for the show and, lots for the website, and I'm always asking your advice. But have you ever felt like you had tools or abilities that felt more like burdens? Yeah. And it's amazing. Like we don't realize that some of our, our weirdness, our quirkiness, our abilities, they're not burdens. And that's what today's episode is actually titled. It's Reframe Your Burdens and Harness Your Gifts. And today we're going to explore what it means to harness your gifts so they become strengths rather than burdens, not only yourself, but on others. And my guest today is Emma Schurink. She is considered a highly sensitive person, or an HSP, whose overwhelming sensitivity to sensory processing used to hinder her ability to be present and authentic, as well as really connect with others. And we'll be discussing how she turned what felt like a burden into a gift, allowing her to be an effective empowerment coach at the young age of 27. And I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, at 27, I wasn't doing this. So I think you're going to love this episode today, but I want to give you a little bit more information about Emma. She is of Soul Winds Empowerment, which I love, a fellow nature enthusiast, which is wonderful. She's an empowerment coach and creative who guides people to nurture deep connections with self, others, and the world. She understands that we can only connect with others as deeply as we connect with ourselves. And let me repeat that, because I think a lot of people forget that, right? When we don't love ourselves, we can't love others. Same thing as connections. We connect deeply as we connect with ourselves. And through her one-on-one sessions and really created workshops, she leads people to build trust in their intuition, reframe their self-talk, and make choices that feel authentic. Because empowerment starts from within and emanates outwards. And that will help transform our culture as we transform ourselves. She's a certified spiritual and life coach and is a student of somatic experiencing, training to become a certified somatic experiencing practitioner. And she earned her BA in sociology from Kenyon College. So welcome, Emma, to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Erica. It's an honor.
And I just love it, because I think although we're maybe 20 plus years a gap, we are kindred spirits, and I love it, because I want to tell more our audience, because during the introduction I mentioned HSP, or highly sensitive person. What does it mean to be a highly sensitive person?
Yeah, it's a good question. I only became aware of it a few years ago, and I'm just learning more about it. So my understanding of it is that it's a character trait that was identified in 1996 by Dr. Elaine Aron. And before I had heard the term, I just thought that when someone called me sensitive, I just assumed it was about emotions, like, oh, I'm emotionally sensitive. But understanding this character trait that she's identified has really helped me understand who I am and the way I move through the world. And so there's an acronym called DOES, DOES, and it stands for, or the D stands for depth of processing. And so highly sensitive people tend to be very reflective, think a lot about the meaning of life and explore existential questions, which I've definitely had my fair share of. And we tend to be hyper aware of what's going on in ourselves and around us, maybe more so than someone who doesn't necessarily identify with this trait. And we see the consequences of our actions and tend to be very conscientious because of that. The O stands for overstimulation, which is kind of like the front and center component of this trait. We're very easily overstimulated by sensory input and having overwhelming physiological responses. So like loud sudden noises really are hard for me, like a sudden dog bark or a motorcycle engine revving, especially when I'm not when it's unexpected. My nervous system just like clenches and I'm on edge for a good few minutes. It takes time to recover. And we also get really worn out when a situation is complicated and intense or something goes on for a long time. Like a long commute can really just overwhelm. And then the E stands for emotional responsiveness, as well as empathy. And so emotions really propel our depth of thinking. We tend to process things more when we care about them. And we tend to be aware of the emotion that drives behavior, again, maybe more so than a non-HSP. And we tend to feel empathy. And I will say too that HSP and empathy and empaths, there's a big correlation there. And then the last one, S, is for sensitivity to subtleties, which is the big one that I think comes into the conversation today. It's this tendency to pick up on signals that are very subtle and kind of read between the lines, picking up on, sometimes I can't even articulate what necessarily what I'm sensing, what subtlety it is, but because of our awareness to nonverbal cues, we can often sense someone's mood or whether they're trustworthy almost immediately. And it ties into intuition and all of that. And then a downside of it is that when we are worn out, we tend to be less aware of others and our surroundings and hyper aware of our own inner experience.
And I think that I loved how you explained it, because I think sometimes we all cling to acronyms, but it's that those are perfect, right? We understand then what affects and what also characterizes. But so in your life, how has being an HSP challenged you in your life and in your career?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, for the longest time, it was such a burden and I couldn't articulate it. I didn't really have the words for it or the understanding of it. So yeah, it was just really hard. But I would say that one of the main difficulties was I was an only child, and so I spent a lot of time alone. And so being prone to existential thoughts and really thinking about the meaning of life and being alone, and I dwelled in those thoughts and didn't have many distractions. And I also didn't have much of an imagination. A lot of only children rely on imagination to kind of create imaginary friends and imaginary worlds that might be quite pleasant or creative. And I didn't have that. So I was really stuck in this existential quandary and this sense of loneliness. And I would say that I really felt a lot of, I was never diagnosed with this depression, but when I look back at my childhood, I was definitely depressed. And then I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Brooklyn, and that is the center of overstimulation. And so car honking and sour smells and crowds and not much nature to kind of calm down with. And so that was really hard as well. And at that time, I didn't really understand. But as soon as I was 18 and I left for college, and I went to a college in a rural area, I felt the difference. And even growing up, I mean, it's not like I never left the city, but yeah. And so the struggle was that I was really stuck between wanting quiet time to recover from the overwhelm, but also longing to be with people and not alone in my existential lonely thoughts. And so that tug, that pull was really hard. And I got really needy and attached to people. And I really had to look at that to be able to connect with people in an authentic way.
And that's where you're almost like stuck between two worlds. The
Yeah.
it's I mean, different, but like an introvert, right? Who
Hmm.
does want to go out and mingle, but then needs that decompression time afterwards, right? Yes, okay, I can do one social event a day. I can't do something in the morning and at night, right? So I it's knowing that balance and knowing
Yeah.
that there are benefits and to the maybe opportunities that it does also force upon somebody. So what I
Yeah.
want to do, because I do want to get into kind of how this then became part of your career, but I want to wait to the next segment to talk about that. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about doing the work. But before we go, Emma, tell folks how they can reach you.
Yeah, you can reach me by visiting my website, soulwindsempowerment.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at soulwindsempowerment.com. And if you want to send me an email, you can send me an email at soulwindsempowerment@gmail.com.
Wonderful. You are listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any portion of today's episode, you can catch it on getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com. Don't forget to subscribe online to receive the latest news, events, specials, and words of encouragement. Go to getrootedradio.com. A big welcome back to my guest, Emma Schurink. Emma, thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So now we're going to talk about doing the work. During the last segment, we discussed what a highly sensitive person or an HSP was. And before we get into some of that doing the work and turning that turning that burden into a gift. Now, we don't want to turn gifts into burdens. That's a whole different episode. No. But how has being an ESP led to becoming an empowerment coach? What was your journey like?
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say that my journey was really influenced by my own journey, my own story, my own overcoming a lot of these sensitivities as burdens, and being so sensitive to my inner world and my painful emotions of depression and loneliness. I couldn't ignore them. I think sometimes people have an easier time ignoring them, and I was always so impressed when people could do that. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And so a lot of times before I really understood them, I would numb myself with binge watching TV or compulsive eating. Those are my two big ones and still can be. But because I couldn't ignore them, I really had to find ways to feel relief. And so I asked myself questions like, what do I need right now? What would offer me relief? And like I said, those numbing tactics, they wouldn't lead to lasting change. It was just a temporary fix. And so I was really determined to offer myself sustainable relief. I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And so when I did and I could find that relief, it felt so good. And I really just decided that I wanted others to find that in their lives, especially as I noticed friends and family really struggling with that and wanting relief. And so that was one of my big inspirations to become a coach. Another one was because of my sensitivities to subtleties and picking up on cues from people and reading between the lines. As I did my own healing and my own empowerment work, I started to have capacity to really listen to people and tune in that way. And so there was this one specific moment a couple years ago with a friend who was a newer friend, and every time I was with him, he shared all these things about his life that he loved and how he was so excited that he was had his own business and it was successful and it was meaningful. It was like environmentally conscious landscaping, and he was starting to become a musician and writing music and songs. And then at the same time, he would also talk about this self-help work that he was doing. He was whatever he was listening to that day or reading, but in this way that it was clear he was looking for something and he wasn't happy. And so one time we found each other, we were swimming with some friends and we kind of found each other on a dock, and he started to share similar stories, and I just listened, and I waited for the moment that felt like he would be ready to hear a question. And I compassionately offered the question, what happens if you put the self-help material down and really embrace this life that I'm hearing that you're really loving and enjoying? And he had never thought of that. And he looked at me and he told me that, and he continues to thank me to this day for being able to pick up on that and reflect something back to him that he wasn't able to see on his own. And so he encouraged me to go this direction of becoming a coach. And so it was moments like that, and they kept happening within a couple of months of each other. And so, yeah, I decided that it was a calling of mine.
And so that it was that kind of that moment with this friend, right? As you're listening to him, and that like you said, that's one of the qualities, characteristics of a highly sensitive person is being able to be in tune with somebody else. Is that when you started seeing this as a gift rather than a burden?
Yeah, I would say I don't know if I connected the dots fully at that time, that it was all connected. I think that what I noticed in that moment was that I have an ability to sense timing. Like it was this question that I had brewing in my mind for I would say a few weeks, but I didn't feel like there was a time that I could bring it up or that he was really open to hearing it. And so when I noticed that I had picked up on a timing component and how it really was a time that he could hear it and resonate with it, that's what stuck with me in that moment, sensing that energetic subtlety.
And I like the statement you made, is that you weren't sure when to bring it up, but I also think that it's a second part that really caught me, is that was he ready to hear it? And I think we all have those stages, is that and I won't go through the whole little fable, but there was a fable where a man was lost and he was asking God, the universe, for a sign. And I know there was a boat, then there was a plane, then there was a helicopter, and then unfortunately the man died. And I'm very much paraphrasing this fable, but and when he got up to the great unknown, he said, I asked for a sign. And the universe, God, told him, I sent an airplane, I sent a boat, I sent a helicopter. What more of a sign do you want? It's the time where are we ready to hear it, right? Are we ready to receive the message? And it sounds like you had all these, maybe the negative aspects of an HSP, but there were so many more positive ones that you were then ready to receive them as positive to really then turn this into a gift.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that in doing my own healing work and my own moving through a lot of the parts that weren't working, like I moved to the countryside where I could be calm and have capacity to be present with people, and taking care of myself. Because I was able to do that, I think that the positive attributes of this trait were able to come through in a way that they weren't otherwise, because I didn't have that capacity. HSPs, like before, I mentioned that when we are overwhelmed, we actually can't pay attention to other people because we're so tuned into our own discomfort or our own activation.
Yeah. And I think that's whether you're an HSP or not, right? We all have those times where we can't focus on anything external because we're so overwhelmed with our own emotions, our own situation. How many times we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you were going through that because I was so absorbed in my own life that I didn't see that. So do you have any tips or tricks, different tools for the folks' toolbox so that listeners can help reframe and harness a quality that they're struggling to embrace?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the first thing is get to know yourself and get to know your needs and get to know how to tend to them. It goes along with what we were just saying, but I like to use the metaphor of a fire, that we are like fire because without tending to our personal needs, we burn out, or sometimes unintentionally we cause harm to others and to ourselves. We tend to have less empathy and breed impatience with others and ourselves when we're not tending to that inner fire. And so, yeah, for me, questions are really a big part of my journey, and asking myself, what do I need right now? Those moments that you're sensing that your fire is burning out or your fire is kind of up in flames, is asking yourself, taking a pause and asking yourself, what do I need right now? And
Yeah,
one thing I really, oh yeah.
along those lines, it reminds me of them. I don't know. When I was a kid, we used to do thought onions, right?
Mm,
What is that thought really saying, right? What is the outer layer? All right, let's peel that back. What's the next layer? All right, really, what is it? So it's like you said, take time to figure out what is it that I need. And
mm-hmm,
that superficial thought might be, I want this. And then the next one is, well, I'm feeling this. And then the last one is, okay,
mm,
what do I need? And I think that is so important because sometimes we don't know what we want or don't know what we need.
yeah, I love that image of the onion. Um, and how the thoughts, and then there's emotions under the thoughts, and then there's needs under the emotions. That's really an important way of looking at it. And another thing too is just to say that our culture doesn't encourage us to look at ourselves like that, or to take time to care for ourselves. We think it's selfish. That's what I was taught to think. And so really giving yourself space to ask yourself that question, and to listen to your intuition. That's something I work with people on too, is strengthening one's connection to your intuitive voice, because a lot of times when you ask yourself that question, you're going to hear other voices like, oh, my mom thinks that I need this, or society thinks that I need this in this moment. But what do you really need? What do you know inside of you, your intuitive voice? What is that telling you?
And I like that. And I think it's important. We have to sit with the feelings, right? So that we can understand them and understand ourselves better. Of course, we don't want to unpack and live there. You
Right.
gotta put that down at some point. But having those different moments, right? The moments to take a breath, the moments to have those thoughts. And self-care is so important with that. And I'm not talking just the self-care. I'm not talking about just the massage, not just going to get your nails done, or retail therapy or anything, because those will only mask the situation or your feelings. You need to actually sit with yourself and figure that out. But I love that anybody can do it, right? It takes time, it takes practice, but you can have that chance to take that breath and sit with yourself.
Yeah, and again, back to the burdens and gifts. When we're not in a healthy state in our own beings, it's really hard to be aware of our gifts, but it's even harder to give our gifts. When we're feeling depleted, how can we give? And a lot of times we think we're giving, but we're giving so much of ourselves that we're not tending to ourselves too. We're a pleasing culture in many ways as well. So it's really about finding that balance, and finding how to maintain a healthy spark inside of you.
Well, and I like that. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about your approach to coaching. But before we go, tell folks how they can reach you.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, my website is soulwindsempowerment.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Soul Winds Empowerment. And you can also send me an email at soulwindsempowerment@gmail.com.
Wonderful. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Don't forget to visit getrootedradio.com to listen to a replay of this episode or any other episode, sign up for helpful tips, and learn about upcoming events. That's getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Emma Schurink. Emma, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so today we're talking about how to turn our burdens into gifts. And during the last couple segments, we've talked about highly sensitive person and what that means, and how has that turned your life into a coaching business, as well as how we can have tools not only for HSP individuals, but also specifically embracing something that maybe you feel is a burden. So we had some tips and tricks on that. But now I want to get into more of how it has being an HSP informed your coaching process, and then getting into a little bit of your approach itself. So let's start out there. How has what you thought was your burden, that we all know now is your gift, right? How has that really informed how you approach people for coaching?
Yeah, so I think the big component is my ability to sense subtleties. It's really important for me to see people, whether it's on Zoom or in person rather than over the phone, because I'm able to observe both the significant and subtle body language moments and facial expressions that support my ability to intuitively guide someone. And again, know that timing, like I mentioned before, or kind of have I don't know, the best word I can think of is download, but I feel like I get these downloads based on what I'm noticing, whether I'm able to articulate what it is that I'm noticing or not. But I get these downloads about someone's mood or their capacity. And so that really informs my strategy of how to respond as I work with them. And then that same component, my ability to read between the lines, I feel like I have a good authenticity radar. People say like a gaydar, a gay radar, but I think I have an authenticity radar. I can tell when somebody is saying something and they really believe it, or whether they think they believe it because somebody else wants them to believe it. So like, say somebody says to me, I know I want to stay in my job, but their body language is telling me like they're tense, or their eyes are moving everywhere, or fidgeting, and so that, to me, those are some less subtle things, but signals like that can signal to me, okay, what they're saying and what their body is communicating is not aligned. And so I really can begin to open the door with open-ended questions to get a sense of, okay, where is this knowing coming from? Like, is this really an inner knowing, or is this a knowing because external influences have encouraged this person to think that they know?
Yeah. And I like that, because that's some of the things I do with my clients when we talk about SMART goals. And I do mean truly in the business sense, your SMART goals, right? The specific, measurable, attainable, all those fun business. But I do a twist, and I make sure that is it something special to you? Is it authentic? Is it rewarding? Is it true? Because if you can make a goal and you could probably smash it out of the park, because you're that type of person who, when they make a commitment or make a goal, you earn it, right? You achieve it. But if it's not something that you want, if it's not something that's really authentic to you, it's not going to make you happy. And then they don't understand why. Well, I made this goal and I got it. Why aren't I happy? And I think that's a great tool for you to have, that you, what we used to call in my house a BS meter.
That's another good way to
really
say it.
like, you're saying this, but your tone of voice, your body language is saying the exact opposite.
Exactly.
And that is important and sometimes people don't realize it. Some people do, but they're trying to force
Yeah.
it, right? But other
Hmm.
people, they don't even realize that it's happening.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
their
true.
tells, right?
Yes,
You played
exactly.
cards with somebody long enough, you start reading their tells.
Yeah, totally.
Uh,
It's so true.
so what
Yeah.
other, well, I would say, what other modalities do you incorporate into your practice?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned in my introduction that I'm also a student of somatic experiencing. And just to be brief, somatic experiencing, for those that don't know, is an approach to healing trauma that was developed by Peter Levine. But trauma is defined in this work very broadly as anything that happened to you that was too big, too fast, too soon, kind of overwhelmed your nervous system. You weren't ready for it. And so SE, somatic experiencing, really offers a framework to assess where a person is stuck in the fight, flight, or freeze responses and guide their nervous system back to a healthy baseline. So, coaching offers a good framework to address the mind, the heart, and the spirit, and a little bit of the body. But I felt like I was lacking tools in that area. And I think it's so important to address the body where we are stuck, because limiting beliefs and fears and all of that gets stored in our body. And so, by incorporating SE into my practice and really helping people get unstuck and free themselves on a deep somatic level, so they are able to be more resilient and authentic and present into their lives.
And I love that, because some people still don't quite get that it is truly a mind, body, spirit connection, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's, even if you think of the little things, like if I don't sleep well, then how does that affect your mind? How does that affect your body? How does that affect, your really inner self, right? How does that, they're all interconnected. And that's, an easy example. Or just like, if I don't eat the right foods, is that going to fuel my body? Is my focus going to
Hmm.
be off? And even those obvious things, sometimes people don't connect,
Yeah.
or I got a headache. Well, why do you have a headache? Did you drink water today? And I laugh at that, because I used to tell my kid that, I'm hungry. Are you hungry, or are you just thirsty? I got a headache. Did you
Mm,
drink enough water? She's like, what is this with the water, mom? I'm like, water fuels your body. Come on. But it is, all those things are interconnected. So if you have been pushing down feelings for years, right? Whether it happened 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it might be, they're eventually going to cause damage, right? Whether that's psychological, emotional, mental, physical, it's going to, because everything's interconnected. And so I love
yeah.
that's included in your practice. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think too that talking is such an important part of setting ourselves free and healing, but we can talk all we want, and if we don't address where the block is in our body, is it in our gut, is it, where have we stored it in our nervous system? If we don't address that, for a lot of us, talking, we can talk as much as we want and it still doesn't, we don't have that release because our nervous system is on a different page. And so really bringing everything together and connecting the components of who we are and our being is really important.
So now, given the different modalities that you use, and your different experience, what could one expect to experience, if they decide to work with you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, ultimately, I think people can expect to strengthen their connection with themselves, strengthen your understanding of your needs, your longings, and your intuitive voice, but also your felt sense, which is a big part of somatic experiencing. Really tuning into your physical sensations, which through my own experience with sports, I was really conditioned out of, with the whole, you don't listen to your pain and push past it and, all of that. And so, and I know that other people, whether you did sports or not, we haven't been taught to connect to our felt sense. We haven't been able to articulate, oh, my stomach is clenching, or my throat feels tight. A lot of times when I ask people, what are you feeling in your body when you say that, they can't go there. They're still talking about emotions and thoughts. They're not able to talk about the felt sense. So that's one thing. That's the big thing. You can expect to be heard and seen for what you're up against and what you're moving through. You can expect to be asked open-ended questions that allow you to really explore within yourself. You can expect to receive insights and compassionate reflections that can be hard to arrive on your own, kind of like what I was saying, sharing that story with my friend. And you can expect to be guided into your authentic self and free yourself from fears and limiting beliefs that are really holding you back from creating a life that excites you. But I think ultimately, what you're gonna go walk away with is learnings and techniques to help yourself, beyond our time together. My goal is really not to create a dependence on me, but to really teach you how to do this work yourself and trust your intuition, trust your ability to tend to yourself, and to when obstacles come your way, to know what to do and how to move through them.
And I love that, because I think what sometimes individuals think is that a coach is going to fix their problems. And the biggest thing I tell people is that, listen, I'm not going to fix your problems. I'm going to give you tools where you can fix the things that you need to get fixed.
Yeah.
And, and at the end, if they start telling me, oh, I so appreciate you. You did so much for me. The thing I typically say back is, no, you did the work,
Mhm.
because they have to do the work. They have to put the tools in place. They have to, follow the processes, trust the process in order to get to the point where they are themselves again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my coaching training, accountability was a big topic, and the idea that I'm not going to hold you accountable, but I'm going to help you hold yourself accountable. There's a
Yes.
difference when you rephrase it like that.
And I think that is super important, because people don't realize they do have it within them to 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 do the work and to
Mhm.
make themselves the person that they want, that they see, that maybe they've just forgotten.
Yeah, definitely. We all have the ability.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to round out today's show with looking at the big picture. This is Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back from King and the Queen. I don't know if you can see the little guy here, but he decided to join me for our last segment. But welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any of the information during the last segments, go to getrootedradio.com to listen to the replay. Don't forget to subscribe, sign up for tips and special events, and pricing for upcoming coaching sessions at getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Emma Schurink. Emma, thank you again for being with us today. But before we wrap up today's episode, I'd like you to tell listeners how they can reach you, and you have some upcoming events and programs. Tell listeners about them and how they can learn more and register.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Well, I'm doing a workshop, one of my favorites, and it kind of goes along with that fire metaphor that I mentioned earlier, if you were listening. The workshop is called Tend to Your Inner Fire, and it's really about finding, what is it about? I guess there's many components, but I will help you tune into your intuition and clarify your needs, your physical needs, your mental needs, your emotional and spiritual needs. We will identify what beliefs are limiting you from tending to your needs and brainstorm practices that feel nourishing to you, as well as create healthy boundaries to protect your well-being. And so I would invite you to check it out on my website, soulwindsempowerment.com/workshops. And if you have any questions or want to reach me, I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at soulwindsempowerment.com. And you can send me an email at soulwindsempowerment@gmail.com.
Wonderful. And you definitely want to check that out, because I love that, tend to your inner fire, because we all have that inner fire. And, burnout is a real thing. I think, especially as more people tend to working from home, and their work and personal lives become mashed into one. We need to learn when we need to stoke our own fires. So check it out online. So during the last couple episodes, we had talked, segments. We've talked about, why people should do the work, right? We know we need to do it, but I guess it's more why. And I think that's really my only question that I want to talk about right now is, why is it important to do this kind of self-help, self-empowerment work?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I think about it a lot. Um, I think on a community scale, on a personal, on our in our personal lives, you know, I think it was in my introduction or my bio or something that I really believe that we can only connect with ourselves as deeply as we can connect. We can only connect with others as deeply as we can connect with ourselves. You know, we're wired as social beings. We all long to connect with others. And if we don't do our own work and if we don't know how to connect to ourselves, we struggle to have healthy, sustainable, connective, and meaningful relationships. And so, um, I also like to say that empowerment starts within and emanates outward. You know, when we do our own work, we encourage others to do the same, we improve our relationships, and then that echoes out from community to community and then into the greater world. And I would also say that, you know, I was an activist for a couple years, a few years. I had spent a number of summers on Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota working with Lakota youth. And when Standing Rock, the issue at Standing Rock happened back in, gosh, I don't know what year was that, 2016, 2017. I got really involved and yeah, I was determined to help create large scale systematic change. And I got very involved. I went to Standing Rock, I skipped school, I, you know, went to protests and did all of these things. Really, there were some great successes, and I, not just in my own work, but in the whole movement. I don't think that it was necessarily a loss. I think if you look at, you can decide how you want to look at it, but there were so many blessings that did come out of the movement, like just raising awareness around Indigenous issues and injustices in this country. But you know, I began to realize when, especially when I was there and I saw it firsthand what was happening, I began to realize that the people who are responsible for the violence and greed in our society are really disempowered and insecure. You know, they are struggling, and so it's resulting in violence and power struggle, and they thrive by keeping others small. And so I think that brings this work into context, because I think if we're all doing the work and creating, you know, moving through our insecurities, our traumas, our doubts, our blocks, our fears, we're able to embody healthier behaviors, and we're able to connect better with others. And again, that emanates out. You know, empowerment starts within and emanates out. And so I think large scale activism and change is so important, you know, diversity of tactics. But I think unless we're also all doing our own work, I don't think that that kind of large scale change can be sustainable. You know, I think our culture needs to shift with those structural changes and those, yeah, those bigger components that need to change too.
It's the ripple effect, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
when you start from within, then you change your perspective, you change your communication style, your thinking, your mindset, then that, you know, you can break generational curses that way, right? You can, the behavior, generational behaviors even. I mean, you know, because what, how you speak to your children, to your nieces and nephews, to your loved ones, to just people in the community. I think about it. I mean, somebody opened the door for me, right? Which made me smile. Well, you know, thank you. And which then helped me pick up something on the floor for somebody else. And, you know, you have those little things and they make, and especially the big things, but even those little things, it has a ripple effect on how do you interact with those. And it starts from, how do I see myself? How do I love myself? How do I treat myself? How do I respect
Mhm.
myself? And that goes a long way then to going out to the smaller community, which affects the larger community, which affects global. And I think it's true. That is why we do what we do.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way too to reframe like tending to your inner fire, tending to yourself, because our culture wants to make us think it's selfish. But I think that it actually helps everyone when we can help ourselves. It's a gift we can give to others as well as ourselves.
Yes.
I really want to reframe. I really want to just like debunk that whole it's selfish to tend to yourself. And it's a balance too. It's like if we only tend to ourselves and no one else, or we're refusing to compromise or listen to others, then clearly that's problematic. But to never tend to ourselves, or to think that taking any time to ourselves is selfish, is harmful to us and harmful to our culture. And I think it's actually breeding a lot of our issues that we're trying to solve right now as a culture, as a society, as a world.
Yeah. And I know it's so cliche and it's probably overused, but I truly believe, you can't pour from an empty cup. So, you can give some to others, right? But if you empty all you got into somebody else's cup or 20 different people's cups, then you have nothing. And then what good are you to yourself and to those that you do want to give to? And as cliche as it sounds, it's the truth. And doing that work, this empowerment work, the self-help work, is important when it does have that ripple effect.
Yeah, and to bring it back to burdens and gifts, when we don't do that work, we can be a burden to ourselves and others, and when we do the work and we turn our qualities into gifts, like, oh, that just sounds so open. It's like my chest wants to open and I want to like take a deep breath. Like, oh, we all have something to offer. And if we get to a point where we have capacity to really know our gifts and know what we can offer, and offer it in a really genuine, compassionate way, not just to receive like praise or to, put a band-aid on our insecurities, but to really offer it in a genuine way. That makes me smile to think that that's a possibility for us.
Well, thank you, Emma, so much for being with us today. And thank you for what you're doing for your community and the world at large. You're going to be amazing.
I appreciate it.
And I want to thank you all for tuning in to Get Rooted Radio. If you missed any part of today's episode or you want to listen again, go to getrootedradio.com for the podcast. And don't forget to tune in the first and third Monday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. Before I sign off, remember to ask yourself, are you living a rooted life? If the answer is no, then take action to make that answer a yes. One way to take action is to set up your free Empower Hour call with me, no charge, no obligations. Go to getrootedradio.com to find out how I can help you take that action. And if you're ready to live, love, and let go, join me for my signature 12-week group coaching series, The Rooted Life. This series will assist you in achieving your goals, moving forward by letting go of those things that no longer serve you, and learning to love yourself and others fully and living life to its fullest. Go to getrootedradio.com to learn more about the 12-week series and to get that free Empower Hour. Thank you for tuning in. Have an amazing day, and I'm looking forward to the next time on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Visit getrootedradio.com if you've missed any part of this hit show, and tune in on transformationtalkradio.com to live fearlessly in your more and powerfully rooted in your unlimited yes. For more information and to work with Erica directly, visit getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com, and get ready to live it up, love it up, and let it go.